All right, so welcome to our webinar today, Eclipse Outreach Programs, where we are going to be sharing role model strategies for engaging youth in STEM with kind of a focus on the upcoming total solar eclipse for this April. This webinar is being made possible by two projects that StarNet is involved with. The first is NIFTY, NASA Inspires Futures for Tomorrow's Youth, a SciAct funded project, and also our SEAL Solar Eclipse Activities for Libraries project funded by the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. So I'm going to turn it over to Dylan to lead us into some introductions and an icebreaker, and then we'll get into it.
Thanks, Claire. So if we can head to the next slide. We have five speakers today. My name is Dylan Connolly. I'm from the Space Science Institute. I'm an education specialist at the Space Science Institute in StarNet. My pronouns are he and they. And I'll turn it over to Claire and the TPT team to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Dylan. Yes, my name is Claire Ratcliffe Adams. I'm an education associate at the Space Science Institute, where we work primarily helping libraries with their STEM programming for their communities. And my pronouns are she, her. And I'll turn it over to Katie Hessen with Twin Cities PBS.
Hi, I'm Katie from Twin Cities PBS in Minnesota. I am a producer of children's television, and also along with my colleagues Nikki and Julie, we work on lots of great educational activities and professional development resources that we'll be sharing with you today. Go ahead, Nikki.
Hi, I'm Nikki Beverly. I'm the Digital and Engagement Coordinator Digital Engagement Specialist with Twin Cities PBS. And I'm excited to meet you all today.
And hi, everyone. I'm Julie Noyes. I work with Twin Cities PBS, and I am the STEM project coordinator, and I support Katie and Nikki and everyone doing this amazing outreach. And welcome.
All right, thanks, y'all. So let's go over a quick agenda for today. So we're doing this introduction. We're going to do a quick icebreaker that should be pretty fun. We're going to just provide some brief information about the NIFTY and SEAL projects, if you're not familiar with those. Then we're going to be handing it over to the TPT team to talk about the role model strategies guide and the 8 role model strategies for engaging youth that we're going to be talking about today that are going to be really useful if you're doing Eclipse programming. Then we're going to wrap up by talking about some additional resources that are available through StarNet to help you if it's your first time or you're early in your science communication or outreach kind of missions. And then we'll open it up to a Q&A if y'all have any questions for the team as we're wrapping up the webinar. So let's go ahead and get into an icebreaker. We are running this like a webinar, so if you want to put your answers to this in the chat, go right ahead. Please make sure that you are switching the to and the drop-down menu from just the host and the panelists to everyone, so everyone can see your answers. But we thought, that we're talking about strategies for doing outreach with the eclipse. So, it's all about solar science. It's NASA's big year of heliophysics this year. So to just get ourselves in that mind space, we thought, let's talk about what solar feature do you feel like today? So are you a sunspot? Are you relatively cool, calm, and collective, but also embracing change and transition? Are you a solar prominence? Are you showy and bright while also feeling grounded and connected? Are you a coronal mass ejection, powerful and influential and maybe ready to mess some stuff up? Or are you the sun's corona? Are you gassy and sassy, but you won't let anyone shadow dim your light? I know for one, I am usually feeling gassy and sassy, but today, because we're sharing out all these fantastic strategies with you, I'm feeling a little bit coronal mass ejection. I feel like I'm gonna help give y'all some strategies. We're all gonna be giving you some strategies and hopefully influencing you to do some better programming. We got some answers in the chat. We have a few sunspots, lots of coronal mass ejections. That's really cool to see. Stephanie's really striving to be the sun's corona, gassy and sassy. We have been using this icebreaker quite a bit over some webinars recently, and I think 99% of that is because we all enjoy saying gassy and sassy at the start of a webinar. So I appreciate that, Stephanie. So we're seeing a lot of sunspots, a lot of coronal mass injections, a couple of sun's coronas. Excellent. Knowing that we've got some researchers from SSI, I know that y'all are attending the webinar today. I know y'all are extra familiar with these solar features. So we appreciate you both not overly critiquing our descriptions of these solar features and participating in such a fun icebreaker. Now I'm going to turn it over to Claire to talk a little bit about the Nifty and SEAL projects.
Great, thanks, Dylan. Yeah, so we've been working on 2 projects leading up to the eclipse, for the last couple of years. Those of you from SSI know we've been traveling all around the country, plus territories, discussing getting libraries ready for this event, and also the annular eclipse last October as well. But while we've been doing that, Dylan and I have also had the privilege of working with Twin Cities PBS, who's leading the Nifty project. And that acronym stands for NASA Inspires Futures for Tomorrow's Youth. And yes, you're allowed to be jealous of our project acronym. So this has been a really great project connecting role models who are science, subject matter experts to youth in library programs and other educational programs. This project goal is to connect NASA STEM role models with youth serving STEM programs, specifically for underrepresented youth ages 9 to 14 in STEM. So this tween age is quite a unique time in a person's life, and it's where we feel like we can really help build that STEM identity. And a lot of research shows that the impact you all have as role models is huge. This project also has a critical focus on girls and other historically excluded genders in STEM, which includes cis girls, trans youth, gender nonconforming and or non-binary youth of color, and their families. So we have been working also with the National Girls Collaborative Project to do a literature review and really look at the most recent updated evidence-based approaches for connecting youth, specifically girls, in STEM topics and helping them explore and build their STEM identity through the use of role models. So that's our Nifty project. Also, since we have a perspective today that's focusing on the eclipse, a lot of these resources and materials, especially the hands-on activities that will show you how to find them at the end of the webinar, have been developed through our SEAL project, Solar Eclipse Activities for Libraries. There have been contributions to this project from our NASA My Library project as well. And let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing with this. So we have really been focusing on the 2023 annular eclipse in October and the upcoming total solar eclipse in April. We have been distributing eclipse glasses to public libraries. I think this number here, 5 million, is actually lower. I think we were closer to 7 million glasses. But the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation provided the funding for these glasses for the 2017 eclipse, and they came to us again for these eclipses this year and in 2023, and wanted to support our work as well. So we've been able to distribute glasses all across the country. These glasses have only been going to libraries. I just want to make that clear. If you are looking for eclipse glasses, we unfortunately cannot provide that for you. And so our focus has been on public libraries. Just wanted to make that disclaimer in case you have questions about that. We've also put together solar science kits. And as I said before, we've done in-person trainings in all 50 states, plus 4 US territories for the last couple of years. So it's been a lot of fun connecting with people, learning what the libraries are planning to do with their communities. And then next comes you. All of the libraries that we've worked with have expressed interest in connecting with subject matter experts. So I'm assuming you're here today because you're planning an outreach event for the eclipse. So we hope this can be useful for you. If you're attending today and you're not planning on doing any outreach for the eclipse, this is still a very valuable webinar for you. These strategies that TPT is going to be going over can be used in any type of outreach program with youth. Doesn't have to be solar science, but we're just so excited. It's almost April, so we thought we'd do, one more push about the solar eclipse. All right, and with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to our partners at TPT to dig into those strategies.
All right, thank you, Claire. Let me share my screen real quick. There we go. Can you guys all see my screen? Okay, perfect. So again, I'm Katie, and I will be talking along with my colleague Nikki about role model strategies for encouraging youth to consider STEM careers. So this is something that our group at Twin Cities PBS has been working on for 15 years, probably. We've been doing professional development on content like this. Predominantly tied to a show that we make that's on PBS Kids called Girls. And so one of our big strategies is about getting role models, and that's you all, people that work in STEM fields, helping them feel comfortable talking to youth and really showing them research-based strategies for things that they can do when they're talking with youth. So that's what we're going to dig into today. Full disclosure, this is a training that Nikki and I usually do as a 90-minute training, and we're going to do it today in like 25 or 30 minutes. So we're going to be talking fast. That's why. Dylan is going to share out a video of a longer version, like the full version of this training. So if you want to learn more, you want to see more like specific things you can do, you'll be able to watch that video, or also read the guide that we have. So you'll get a link to this paper, or this PDF guide that has all kinds of tips and tricks and things that you can do. So I'm going to dig right in and start talking about the words we're going to use. So I'm going to be talking about role models. So let's talk about the difference between a role model and a mentor. So a role model is someone that has a shorter term interaction, and mentors generally have longer interactions. So this might be your coach, or like your advisor in high school or college or something like that, someone that has a longer interaction. And so role models, it can be as simple as someone who's coming to talk to a group for half an hour, or just a quick virtual interaction. Or role models can even be people that kids have never met, right? Someone might say, Mae Jemison is my role model, and it's like they've never met Mae Jemison, but it's someone that helps inspire them. So we're going to talk about these like short-term interactions and things that you can really do to help inspire youth to learn more about STEM and STEM careers. So strategy number one, there's 8 strategies. So strategy number one is about making a personal connection to create an inclusive learning space. So this is about creating a space, whether that's a real space or a virtual space, but creating a place where people feel welcomed, included, and where they feel like they belong. So you can do that by starting with an icebreaker, like Dylan started us off today. That just helps people feel more comfortable, helps them feel like they can talk, like they can participate, like they're allowed to be there and they're welcome to be there. But this is also about just making a connection. And so finding ways that you can learn more about the youth or the people in the program that you're going to be talking to, so that you can try and tailor what you're talking about to who they are. So like if you know that you're talking to a Girl Scout troop and you were a Girl Scout, like make sure you share that. Or you're talking to a robotics team, try and, talk about robotics a little bit, even if you're not a robotics person, but like bring that up so they know that you're thinking about who's in the room, or in the space. And a lot of this can also just be about you being mindful and planning ahead to think about who you're going to talk to. Every presentation you give is not always the same. Every group of people that you talk to is always going to be different. So just taking the time to think about, who am I talking to today? How old are they? Where are they from? Where do they live? Like where in the country? Is this people from all over the country? What ages? And things like that. What languages do they speak at home? What are other like demographic areas of or information about the people that I'm talking to? So think about all of that. So strategy number 2 is share your whole self. So this is one that maybe sounds tricky, but it's not. So here we're just talking about sharing more about you than just what your job is. So it is interesting to be like, oh, hi, I'm Katie. I work at Twin Cities PBS. But if you want to connect with the youth and the people that are in the room, you want them to see you as a person and not just a job. So think about ways that you can share more about yourself. And that can be sharing personal stories, like making your talk be kind of a talk about you and you sharing your story. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But one of the ways to really share your whole self is also showing pictures. And show pictures of you and your coworkers, show pictures of you out doing your job, show pictures of you and your family, or you and your pets. Kids really, really, really love to see pictures of your pets. And even if it's like, this is the dog I had when I was a little kid, or this is me playing with my neighbor's dog, like it's just a fun way to connect with a group of people and for them to see you as a real person and as a human, and to maybe make them a little bit more interested. Because if they're not interested in what you have to say, they're not going to listen, right? So we want to find connection points and things that will make them smile or make them wonder more, so that they continue to listen to what you have to say. So another important part, you'll notice we all did this on the first slide, is about sharing your pronouns. And it's an important way to just make everybody feel included. Everyone has pronouns. You don't want to assume or imply that someone else needs to share their pronouns if they don't want to. And you should also never assume what someone's pronouns are, or kind of leave the ownership on them that they would share pronouns only if their pronouns are maybe not what you might think they are. So it's just an easy thing to just always kind of share your pronouns. If you're virtually talking, you can put them in your signature or in your little like name bubble that pops up under your picture. If you can do that, you can't always. But share your pronouns, and just remember that everybody has pronouns. It's just a really fast, simple thing to do. And just some reminder that there are lots of different pronouns, and everybody has their own feelings about what pronouns they use. So she, her, he, him, they, them, ze, zer. There's lots more than that, actually. So there's lots of different types of pronouns. So that's another way that you can share your whole self with a group. Trying to pause just a little bit, not talk too fast, but okay. So number 3, this is where we get into some really fun kind of storytelling that you could do. And this is sharing your STEM journey. And so again, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. If you're a STEM professional, you're anyone who uses any of those things in your job. And what we really want, like one of our big goals, is for the youth that you're talking to be able to see themselves as a person who could have a STEM job. So one of the ways to do that is to talk about how you got to your job. How did you get here, right? It's more than just, I went to, this university and I got this degree. It's like, what did you do along your path? How did you get there? What was hard? What was different? Everybody's path looks different. And so it's good to share that information, right? Think about what the youth might find interesting about your story, or what might be different, something they wouldn't expect. So you can talk about choices you've made along the way, like, well, I had to decide, do I want to stay in my hometown for college? Did I want to move? I decided to do this. I decided to do this. That can be really helpful information. It goes a long way for showing youth a pathway to get to a certain career. And remember that you're not at the end of your STEM journey. So you can also include in here excitement about the future, or what your job could be next, or where you might see yourself going. Because we're always along our journey. We're not at the end of it, right? So another part of this, sharing your STEM journey, is talking about how rewarding your job can be, and both personally and professionally. So this can be things like, I love my job because it gives me time to be home with my kids. Like, I'm working from home right now, and I love that because I'm home when my kids get off the bus from school. Like, that is actually a rewarding part of my job. In addition to the cool stuff I get to do making a TV show, right? So there's lots of different rewarding parts of careers, and things that you can talk about. And I think another thing to think about, if you're talking to a bunch of like 12-year-olds or middle schoolers, think about where you were in middle school and what inspired you. So it could be as simple as like, well, when I was in middle school, I just wasn't interested in science, or, I didn't think I was ever going to use math, and now here I am using this. Or when I was in middle school, I loved math and I was on a robotics team, and I used to have a telescope that I would bring out, so think about what inspired you when you were their age. that's another way you could make a connection to how you can get to where you are today. Okay, pause. So I want to define a term before I talk about the next strategy. So this is an important one. We hear people talk about diversity all the time. And so I just want to point out that diversity means a lot of things, right? It is not just the language someone speaks or their religion or the color of their skin. It is those things also, but it can be lots of other things, right? It can be about socioeconomic status. It can be kind of wide cultural backgrounds, lifestyles, kind of people's life experience can also be an important part of diversity. And I bring that up because we're gonna talk about diversity in the next strategy. So think broad interpretation of diversity. It can mean lots of lived experiences of people. That's really what we're looking for. So strategy number 4 is about showing the diversity of people that work in STEM. And as a role model, as someone who is representing someone who has a STEM career, it's really important that you show that everybody can belong in these jobs. And so you want to show and try to talk about all the different types of people that work in these careers and what they bring to the table, right? Like that having varied backgrounds and varied perspectives really makes for a richer STEM field and increases problem-solving abilities and makes everyone's experience better when more people are at the table. So you can do this in a couple different ways. You can share stories, but only sharing stories that are appropriate and that you have permission to share, right? You don't want to share a story about you and a coworker if the coworker doesn't know that you're going to be sharing that story, right? So always think about that kind of thing. And you can do it by showing pictures too. So I'm going to give an example in a few minutes of a role model talk that I gave at my middle school down the street in my neighborhood. And one of the things I do is show pictures of like a group picture of the people that I work with and kind of point out how like we all have different backgrounds and different strengths, and that makes our team stronger as a whole. That we all have these different perspectives and different skills. And it's important to really always point out how diversity increases innovation and problem solving, and that we all become stronger by having a more diverse group around us. Okay, slow down because I've been talking really fast. I'm going to hand it over to Nikki now. She's going to talk about the next strategies.
Thanks, Katie. So strategy number 5 is encourage learning from setbacks. And this is all about promoting perseverance. So when you're speaking with youth and you're talking about your STEM journey, really reflect back on from the very early stages when you were back in, first, second grade, all the way to where your career is now. And what happened? What challenges did you face along the way, and how did you overcome them? Maybe, math wasn't your favorite subject, but now it's a big part of what you do, and you've still been successful in your career despite that. Maybe you were the only person of color in your classroom, and how did that affect your life, and how did you overcome that? Just thinking about those situations, those challenges you faced throughout your career and throughout your STEM journey, and promoting that perseverance, thinking about how fail is first attempt in learning, and how that is a big part of the process in STEM, and how you would be doing an activity or working on a project and maybe it didn't work out the first time, and how that's okay, and how you kept trying and maybe you never even got an answer, and that's also okay. That's also a part of learning and a part of the STEM work that you do. So really focusing on developing that growth mindset and belief that intelligence can develop with effort and learning. Other ways to do this is to provide specific feedback on things that youth can control. So thinking about questions that get to that process of learning around how did you get that answer? What did you decide to do next? And dig into how they got to where they are versus that sort of fallback of, wow, you're so smart. That's great. Good job, but really kind of digging into that process of learning and how they got to where they are. And then most importantly, shows that scientists don't have all the answers. It's okay to say, I don't know when speaking with youth. If you don't know the answer, talk about how you can figure that out together. Let the youth come up with ideas on how they can find that answer with you. Next slide. Okay, communicate how your work impacts people, your community, and the world. So this one, when we talk to role models, they sometimes have a bit of a struggle with this one, just because sometimes it's hard to think about how your job is really impactful in like both a macro or micro way. And we want you to think about this not as like, I work in climate change, so I'm, doing that big, huge piece, but really think about all the ways that your work is impactful. Do you do a job that makes things more efficient for other people? Are you helping people does your job create other jobs so people can work and provide for themselves and their families? Maybe your work, provides opportunities to others and improves access to resources. Just thinking about all the ways that your career can be impactful in what you do with youth, or is what you do in your career. And then talking about what you like in your job, which is what Katie had also alluded to before, highlighting everyday aspects of your job that make you smile. It doesn't have to be that your job changes the world, but maybe you really like your coworkers, or you like your office location, or you, as Katie said, it gives you a really great work-life balance. Maybe it's because you make a lot of money, and that's a great aspect of your job too. Just thinking about those ways that really highlight why your job makes a positive impact on both you and the world. Next slide, Katie. So we're going to think about that for just a second. Sorry about the little layout formatting that happened, but how does your job impact people and your community and the world? And because of time, we're not going to openly discuss this right now, but please in the chat, just take a moment as we keep moving forward and think about those ways that you're impacting everyone in a positive way, and add it in the chat. And we can go to the next slide, Katie. Show how STEM is creative and collaborative. Most careers, you're not just the only person working in your room. And even if you are the only person working in what you do, there's someone else down the line who you're going to likely be working with. Maybe you've developed something and you need a communications person to disseminate that for information out into the world. Really thinking about all those ways that your job works with others and how it is collaborative, even outside of just the direct STEM work that you're doing. One way to do that is, if you're working with the youth, is to do hands-on activities. And you can do this even if you are working in a virtual setting and you can't be there in person. If you are working in a virtual setting and you want to do a hands-on activity with youth, it's important to work with those program leads that you'll be in communication with as you are setting up your presentation, to make sure that they are aware that you plan to do this and that they have the activities and the space and the resources in place. But when you're doing activities with youth, it's important to assign meaningful roles to them, making sure everybody has a part in the process. Encourage participation with open-ended questions. Ask the youth what they know about what you're about to do. Like, why is this important? What are you making? What is this project? Help them make predictions before they jump into the activity. Save questions till the end. Invite discussions throughout your visit. And just really make it a collaborative experience for all. Next slide, Katie. And our last strategy is provide resources for support and guidance. So what does that mean? It's important for youth, once you leave this presentation in this program with the youth, to know what to do next. So maybe they got super inspired and they want to go forward in this STEM journey of their own. Giving them resources to help them make that journey is important, so they know what to do. So first, you can talk about why your STEM classes matter. If they're, why have I to take calculus? Think about, help them discover why those are important and what they're important, and how those classes helped you get to where you are today. Offer avenues for investigating STEM careers. Is there after school opportunities that they can join, maybe in their community or within their school? If you're not sure, if you're not from that area and you don't really know what's to offer, this is a really good opportunity to work with the program lead beforehand to discuss what those opportunities might be in their community. Help them think, maybe they don't want to be a NASA engineer, but they still want to understand what other STEM opportunities there are. Think about things like trade schools, talk about electricians and mechanics. All of these are valuable STEM careers that they could follow in their journey. And then once again, just plan ahead when you're working with these programs and really get to know the community. And Katie spoke to this as well, the youth in the program, what resources there are available already in that community that you can point them to when you're done with their program. Okay, so here's the strategies that we just discussed today. Take a moment to look at them and then think about what strategies do you think you use the most when working with youth? Are there any that jump out at you right away that you're like, I got this, I know what I'm going to use when I go to these programs? And you can put that in the chat. So Stephanie says, sharing my STEM journey. Any other strategies jump up for anyone? Probably a combination of 3 and 4, but I should add both 7 and 6. And the guide that Dylan held up earlier, or Dylan and Katie held up, has a lot of tips on how to do a lot of these. If you're not sure how to incorporate them into your presentation when you're speaking with the youth, there's many tips in there on how to do that as well. Michelle says 5 seems huge, especially since so much of the gender gap in STEM stems from the idea that competence is inherent. Yeah, and we really try to that's a big one for us when we're working with both educators and role models and their interactions with youth in STEM, is really highlighting that perseverance, that growth mindset.
One thing I really like about the role model strategy guide is it doesn't just have the tips and tricks for using these strategies. There's also included a kind of pre-role model visit checklist and worksheet that asks you questions and is a good way of preparing that directly addresses each one of these strategies. So there's kind of a quiz you can give yourself to prepare beforehand to show that, you know, how thinking about how your work is collaborative, reflecting on what challenges you faced in your STEM journey that kind of hit a lot of these different role model strategies, and is a good way of doing some prep work before you go in and do any kind of role model or outreach visit, which I think is really, really cool.
Thanks, Dylan. All right, I think I'm next, right, Nikki, Rita?
Katie, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, like Dylan said, the full guide really has a lot of tips, and it asks you questions to kind of help you prep for how you can introduce yourself and how you can have a great role model visit. So again, role model visit, this is when you're interacting with the public or a youth group, and how can you introduce yourself and talk about yourself and your career in a way that's really going to be inspiring to the group that you're talking to. So I'm going to flip through the slides. I'm not going to give my whole presentation because it takes like 15 minutes, but the video that Dylan shared with you all has me giving this presentation. But what I'm going to point out is just a couple things about my presentation slides and how they kind of tie into the role model strategy. So this is kind of my intro slide. Again, this is from when an actual talk that I did to some middle school groups on a career day at my local middle school. So I've got where I went to school and what my current job is, but I work for a PBS station. So my icebreaker is always about what is your favorite thing to watch on PBS? And that's always really fun, I think, to see what everybody is talking about. So I've got my pronouns on there. I've got what my job is, and a bit of an icebreaker. And then I jump in to talking about myself. And here's pictures. Again, I've got pictures of my cats because everybody loves to see that. My family, my kids, something I like to do, right? And I try to tell this in kind of a story format. So I say, you know, here I am, look at, you know, I'm not just a job, I'm Katie. I live in your neighborhood, things like that. And then I talk about my job, my actual job. And again, I've got pictures depicting my job, like me actually working and me standing with a bunch of coworkers. And I talk about how cool my job is and why I think my job is important and stuff like that. And I also try to remember, although I forget a lot of the time, but I like to talk about my coworkers. So that's why I've got a group picture, a couple group pictures, and I try to talk a little bit about like everybody's strengths and how everyone brings something different to the table. And that we really all work together as a team. We can't do what we do if we're just one person. And then I talk more about my journey. So like, oh, I have a really interesting job. I'm a science producer. Like I'm the scientist on set when we're filming TV shows. It's kind of a weird job. How did I get here? And so that's where I talk about like, well, I went to school and I went to school for a long time, and here's me in graduate school. But also when I was in graduate school, I like to do a lot of different things. So like, here's a picture of me. I was a competitive ice sculptor for years while I was in graduate school in Alaska. And so it's like kind of showing that like, even when I was at school, I still was a person and I did other things, other fun things. And then I talk about my career path a little bit. I've worked at a lot of places. And so I like to show pictures of me and, the logos of the different various places I've worked. And again, that usually takes me about 15 minutes to kind of walk through that whole story. You can see an example of me doing that, but how are we doing on time? I don't know that we actually have time to talk through any of this stuff. But if anyone has questions, I think we have time for questions now, right? A couple minutes for questions.
Yeah, we're actually kind of doing pretty good on time. So if you did want to go into a little bit into any of this, I think we have the time.
Sure. All right, so then looking at the strategies again, sorry, these are in a different order than the picture we just showed you before, but one of the things I think Nikki and I didn't say is that this project that we've been working on called NIFTY, that's funded through NASA Science Activation, was funding for us to kind of redo these role model strategies with newly updated research and looking into the research. And so that's why we showed things in two different orders, because it was kind of a pilot project where we're moving things around. Here's our final version. But so which strategies did you see when you were looking at my introduction slides? Again, I didn't give my whole introduction, but what did you see in there? What was I doing just by showing pictures and kind of telling some of those stories? Yeah, sharing your whole self. 2, 3, 4, and 7. That's a lot of them. Yep. Sharing my whole self, sharing my journey, showing how it's creative and collaborative, showing diversity. Yeah, I think some of the big ones that are missing are providing resources for support and guidance, right? That's number 8. I didn't touch on that at all. And so again, this is one of those things that you would do as planning leading up to your talk. Like talk to, who is your point of contact? If you're talking at a library, who's your librarian, or who's the Girl Scout troop leader for the troop you're talking to, or something like that, and talk to them and say, what is there that I can talk to the kids about? What do they have available to them? What classes can they take at their local middle school or high school? What science museums can they go to? What books, what programs are at the library? Things like that, to figure out what resources you can share with the youth. Let's see. Cesar says, it looks like I was connecting with your audience on a personal level. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the like really, really big picture goal is trying to connect on a personal level, sharing personal information, only the personal information you are comfortable sharing, right? You should never feel like you have to share something. So only share what you want to share. And that it's genuine, and your audience will feel that when you're talking, that oh, this is a real person, and this is really who they are. That really is their family. It's not just a stock photo that they shared, things like that. So what else do you think you could do to add in more of the strategies? Like, what would you do when you're talking to add in or to touch on these 8 strategies? Try to pause for a minute and not let everybody type. But think about what are the things that you might do differently now? What are you going to do the next time you talk to a youth group? I hope that you're going to show pictures, right? I hope that was very clear. Yep, include lots of pictures in different settings with family, at work. Yep. Talk about my setbacks. Yeah. And talk about your setbacks and how you overcame them and what you did to move past that or how you solved the problem, right? Because that's the big point is everything wasn't always easy and I was able to overcome it. Yep. Talk about a challenge or a setback. Tell a story about a particular project that includes more than one of those specific strategies. Yes, absolutely. Anyone else? I think that is my last slide. Did anyone have questions? I guess I should have asked that too. Yeah, oh, that's right. The one big thing that my slides and my little like mini fake introduction were missing is doing an activity. And someone says that they'll include more interactive activities during live stream and virtual events. Yes, so I didn't include an activity in that, but I would have if I had more than 10 minutes to talk to a youth group. I would have talked about myself and told my whole story and all this, and then figured out a way to do an activity. And you can do an activity even if you are visiting virtually, right? If you're zooming in to talk to a group, you can think about a way to do an activity. And I think Claire's going to maybe show some tips on how to be more interactive if you are visiting virtually, and how you can find activities to do with groups. Yeah. All right. Anyone else? Oh, Patrick says he'll add what they were doing at the age of the audience. Yeah, I think that's really fun, to think about what was I doing when I was 12 and yeah, to give them some perspective. All right, I'm going to hand it back to Claire. Stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk about some additional facilitation strategies for engaging youth, and some resources that might help you when you're planning your programs. All right, so what you see on the screen right here is 3 common types of facilitating a learning program. So you have your, typical stage on the stage, where you as a presenter are giving a lecture. The audience, they're listening to you. There's really kind of a one-way avenue of communication, and the way learning is being made and knowledge is being generated is folks are listening. Maybe there's a slide behind it, so there's a little bit of visual aids as well, but there's not a lot of active engagement from the audience. This can be great. There's a lot of people who learn very well this way. I think most of us in our careers, even when we go to conferences and when we're sharing out what we're doing with our work with our colleagues, are still kind of in this sort of sage on the stage type of facilitation strategy. But in a library setting, in a youth setting, maybe in a multi-generational event, such as an Eclipse program, you can see sort of what we've depicted here in this graphic is varying engagement levels. So again, some people are focused, they are listening, they are going to walk away from this program having learned a lot, whereas others might, be kinesthetic learners or are just a little too young for the content area and need something else, a hands-on activity to really understand what the learning objective is. The next one we talk about is Trivia Master. So you can see there's a little bit more engagement here. This is where the facilitator asks a closed question. So how far away is the Earth from the moon? Something that has a right or wrong answer. audience members are invited to raise their hand, they're called on, and they can give an answer. And then the facilitator either says, yes, that's correct, or nope, anyone else? Who else has an idea? That was wrong. So again, I love going to trivia nights. This is my husband's favorite way of learning. He was on Quiz Bowl growing up and just like has this just like crazy encyclopedia of knowledge in his mind. And so this is really exciting for him, and it could be exciting for a lot of folks. But you can see here too, just in the graphic, the body language of some of the kids might not feel so comfortable. Maybe they don't know the background. They don't have the background knowledge to feel like they can participate. Or maybe they do, and they're just a little more introverted, a little more shy. They don't want to talk in front of a large group. And so they're not going to be participating as actively as maybe some of the other folks would. And then the last one here is guide on the side. So this is where you're really taking a background approach to your role in the learning, and you're putting the learning in the hands of the audience members. So maybe you start with a little bit of sage on the stage, like, hey, everybody, today we are going to learn about constructing bridges. And here is a challenge for you today. I want you to use these materials, work in a group, and you have 30 minutes. I'll be walking around if you have questions, and go. So this is really where the learners are constructing their own knowledge. They're working together. They're learning from each other's background knowledge, and you're available there if folks have questions. So we talk about guide on the side a lot with library staff, especially those who are new to STEM. And library staff might not have a lot of confidence in running a solar science program. So one of the great things about this facilitation strategy is it takes the pressure off of the facilitator to knowing all of the answers and being expected to be the keeper of the knowledge. So we find this works really well in library settings, and it really helps kids especially just get engaged. So it's a little different for you all. You are coming in with the background knowledge. You do have that subject matter expertise. So I encourage you in youth programs to use maybe a mix of all three of these strategies, and maybe lean a little more on that guide on the side. Like, let those kids get excited, let them ask questions. If they ask a question that might be a little off topic, maybe explore that for a little while. Let them be the driver of that experience, rather than just talking at them the whole time. So a couple of strategies to go along with being more of a guide on the side. We have 5 here. So number 1, create a safe learning environment. I think Carrie brought up in the chat earlier the importance of this. So not only is this a physically safe thing, and so thinking of the eclipse, like, we do have safety concerns. You want to make sure folks aren't using equipment wrong, looking at the sun. They have, solar viewing glasses, or are using some sort of indirect way of viewing the sun. So there is that physical safety component, but there's also make it a place where it's okay to ask questions. You can model this by, if someone asks you a question that you don't know, being like, wow, that's a great question. I'm not sure. Let's find that out together. That right there can be hugely powerful for just setting the tone of, hey, we are learning together. And if you don't know, that's okay. And if you had the wrong answer, that's okay too. Like this, just modeling that this is a place where you're not going to be tested. You're not going to be graded. Let's just have fun and explore things together. Another one is open-ended questions. So these are questions that don't have a right or wrong answer, but that anyone can offer answers to. So you, instead of saying, how far away is the Earth from the moon? You can say, tell me about a memory you have of watching the moon. Or, what's your favorite part about gazing at the stars? Things that anyone from any background knowledge, or age even, can feel invited to participate in answering. Number 3, 5-second wait time. So if you are going into that trivia master and you're like, hey, who knows about this, or who's used who has an experience using a sun spotter? Instead of calling on the first person who, if you've done programs with kids, you know, when you ask a question, a lot of times hands will just shoot up because they're just so excited you're there and they want to participate. And I find that even with like third grade and younger, maybe even like first and second grade, a lot of times they'll raise their hand and I'll call on someone and they'll be like, oh, I don't know. They were just so excited. So before you just call on the first person to raise their hand, wait about 5 seconds. Let those kids like really think about what their answer is, and maybe think about calling on someone who took longer to form his or her thoughts. Because, you know, that allows those of us who are a little more introverted just that time to okay, I formulated my thought, my answer. Now I have the courage. Now I'm going to ask it, you know, so try to like really think about who is raising their hand and how you call on them to answer. Number 4 is turn and talk. I love this one because if you just ask a question and you are calling on people who raise their hand, only that one person is given that opportunity to voice their thoughts. So you can instead phrase the question to be, say, you know, ask your question and then say, turn and talk and tell your friends your ideas. And then everyone gets to talk. Everyone gets a chance to verbalize their thoughts instead of just one at a time. And the last one, hands-on activities. Again, with working with youth, this is just a great way to get some complex learning objectives better understood if they get to see it and tinker with it and try again. So consider bringing in a hands-on activity into your presentation. All right, so what if you're doing a virtual presentation? How do you make this as engaging as an in-person encounter with folks? So we do have a couple of virtual facilitation tips. First and foremost, plan ahead of time. So like Dylan said, in that strategies guide, there's a little worksheet. You can start to kind of plan out what you're going to say, what types of other elements you're going to bring to your presentation, but make sure you're talking with the coordinator of the event as well. Schedule a meeting with the library staff or that educator. Ask them, you know, what is the room setup going to look like? If this is a virtual presentation, does everyone have their own computer? Like, am I speaking to groups in a computer lab, or is it going to be more of a I'm projected on a screen and I'm talking to an audience? So understand what the presentation setup is. Ask them too, if you are planning on adding a hands-on activity, make sure they have the materials for that, and just really coordinate on what this event is going to look like, and schedule a practice session. It's really important, you know, check your sound, your like see what the setup is. I think it can be really helpful to have a little rehearsal right before you give your presentation if you have that luxury of that extra time. And explore tools that will make virtual programs more interactive. So if you're doing something on Zoom, you can embed poll questions where the participants can actively, you know, maybe even if they're not talking because it's virtual, but they can still interact, you know, through the chat. Make sure you're using those different functions that so many of these online tools have to make it more engaging. Something I love doing with kids is annotating tools. So there are ways that you can have your slide up and then say, everyone vote on your favorite, you know, if the icebreaker, for example, that Dylan did, if you're not using the chat for that, you can have kids use the annotation tool to maybe draw or put a little graphic on whatever, you know, whatever it is that you're presenting. And then it's very important with virtual programs, make a plan for managing group discussion. That's part of that planning with the coordinator. How are you going to get everyone's attention if you do a hands-on activity and you have, you know, kids in a space that you're not physically at doing activities and you need to bring everyone's attention back to you? Consider things like displaying an online timer on your slides so that participants know when it's time to regroup. I think those visual aids are very helpful, especially working with youth. And make sure you coordinate with the library staff or the educator staff. Have them be the one facilitating the Q&A session and give you cues when everyone's attention is on you. So just make sure there's some sort of plan set with the educator for those group discussions. All right, so hands-on activities. If we have convinced you that hands-on activities are a great way to engage youth, this is a resource that we have developed at StarNet. It's our online STEM activity clearinghouse, and it is at www.clearinghouse.starnetlibraries.org. This has over 500 hands-on STEM activities, ranging for pre-K audiences all the way through adult programs, because I don't know about you, but I love having an opportunity to break up whatever learning environment I'm in with a little bit of a hands-on activity. So we have activities for all ages on this platform. We have, when you first go to the clearinghouse, you'll see our featured collections. And I want to point out that we have 2 specifically curated for solar eclipse activities, or even just solar science activities. Just click into our SEAL collection. And then also we have our Nifty collection, which is activities really geared towards the tween, ages 8 to 14. And there are solar science activities in there, but there's also a ton of other ones, engineering and design challenges, astronomy. There's a range of content areas in this as well. So check out the clearinghouse for ideas for hands-on activities you can do with youth. All right, and we are almost done. These are the last little bits of resources we want to share with you. I'll turn it over to Dylan to walk you through these last resources.
Absolutely. I'm putting the link to the link bank again in the chat. One thing I wanted to just share with you is we have a ton of video resources on the StarNet YouTube channel. If you've never checked it out or subscribed, that's available at youtube.com/@StarNetLibraries. We have, this is all linked in the link bank, but we have tons of great stuff there. Like we mentioned that video of a highlights from the longer 90-minute role model strategies training, which I'm just now realizing is a typo. Here's another tip: double check your PowerPoints before you do your presentation for copy editing. But there's a longer role model strategies training highlights video where Katie and Nikki go even more into depth in all of these strategies. There's a really great example of a longer introduction that Katie does that kind of really goes into a lot of these, uses a lot of these role model strategies. That video is also chapter timestamp, so you can jump directly to each individual strategy as well as each demonstration in there. So you can refer to that if you want some extra help kind of putting together some strategies for any outreach you might be doing. We also have the SEAL virtual trainings playlist. We've been doing a ton of webinars specifically for educators and librarians over the last year. We have, if you're looking for hands-on activities, we have an unboxing webinar of the SEAL collection where we demonstrate multiple activities that are really great for outreach. We have a webinar all about preparing for Eclipse Day if you're planning on doing any Eclipse Day events. We also, I know so many of you are involved in different citizen science projects. We have a whole 4-part series all about incorporating citizen science into library Eclipse programming, where we talk about how to have a daytime star party, how to get started with citizen science, as well as talking specifically with 2 projects you may be familiar with, Eclipse Soundscapes and the team from Globe Observer also came and talked to us about how do you incorporate some citizen science into Eclipse programming. So really great resources there. And if you're looking for some good just general advice on how to do STEM and STEAM outreach, we also have a playlist of STEAM strategies videos, which includes a whole video about Guide on the Side, as well as ones about addressing space and earth science confusions. So really good advice for outreach available on the YouTube channel. And like I said, our YouTube channel and all these playlists are linked directly in that link bank that I've been sharing out. So we have just a couple minutes left in the webinar. We can stay on for a few minutes longer, I believe, but we'll open up the floor now. If y'all have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat.
And we have some great questions in the chat. I'm just going to say out loud for anyone watching the recording. So someone asked, if you have a limited amount of time, is it still useful to talk about yourself? And yes, absolutely. Even if you only have like 30 minutes to do your program, just take the first 3 to 5 minutes to share who you are. That helps youth just start to make that personal connection with you and builds that kind of safe learning environment of like, oh, this is an approachable person. This is, you know, this is someone, it just brings that warmth. And another person asked, I know this is about strategies working with youth, but a lot of them seem applicable for working with teenagers and adults too, if that's the case, or is there anything to keep in mind when adjusting for older audiences? You know, Dylan shared, you know, that's a really great question. One thing to keep in mind about doing outreach with teens and adults is that that age can come with a more kind of self-consciousness and about looking silly or unknowledgeable. So, you know, just I think be a little more intentional, honest with icebreakers. I find that a lot of times icebreakers can be hit or miss with older groups, even adults. So be intentional with it and think about what you might be asking. I think too, being careful about what you're asking the youth to share about themselves, and making sure it's okay. You know, you can participate in this if you want, you know, that type of stuff. All right, side games. Someone asked, can you elaborate more on side games? And we are at the top of the hour, so if you guys need to go, just big thank you for joining us today. You are free to go. I'll stay on for a few more minutes to answer questions. But side games is a product of StarNet, where it is a public-facing way to do virtual games, all about different types of content area in STEM. Yeah, thanks, Dylan. You put the link in the chat. But a lot of what we do is training librarians. So we don't do a lot of like public facing programming or anything, but side games is one of our public facing things. So that's something, it's a resource that we have given to libraries that they can put on their website. They can direct people to it if they want to play some app or like some virtual engagement around different types of STEM content areas.
And these are all linkable too, so they're really great resources if you're doing a virtual presentation or something. I believe somebody said in the chat earlier that they work with climatology and weather models. We do have some weather activities on there, and because these are meant to be public facing, they're linkable or even embeddable into, you can share those out as you're doing virtual presentations. So it's a really good way of, if you have a hands-on activity, but you know, you do the prep work with the site you're doing outreach with, and they're like, sorry, we don't have a budget to go and get materials for a hands-on activity. Demonstrating how to use one of these like web apps by sharing your screen and then inviting virtual participants to engage in this as you're doing your outreach event can be a really good way of doing a quote virtual hands-on activity and having some of that real-time engagement without necessarily needing to walk anybody through building a paper craft or something on camera.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope you have a really fun time in all of your outreach programs leading up to the eclipse or even after the eclipse. And feel free to share our guide with your colleagues if you feel like that this information could be useful for others.
Thanks so much for joining us, y'all. I really hope you have some great outreach events, and this helped give you some strategies for doing some science communication and outreach with youth.
All right.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks
Have
so
a great
much,
day.
everyone.